You're watching Federal Workforce Fallout. Thanks for joining us. I'm Larry Miller. Well, the clock is ticking right now for remote and regional workers with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Some have until this week to either commit to moving and working out of the agency's headquarters in D.C. or lose their jobs altogether. But as these federal workers told me, even if they decide to relocate, there's no guarantee that they won't be laid off in the future. I spoke with Charles Perkins. He's worked for the CFPB for the last 10 years and is a member of the NTEU.
So Charles, get me up to speed about what's going on at CFPB. We know that there is a return to office notice that was sent to employees that are working remotely or working at regional offices. And we understand that that timeline is sort of quickly approaching for many, which will result in some pretty tough decisions.
Yes. So there's four phases of the process. I think those that were already initially duty stationed in the office have already gone back to work. There are some that are coming on this Monday. I think those are phase 2 or 3. I can't remember, that are going in on that time. And I think those are the people that lived, within 50 miles. And then the next phase 3 are people that lived outside of 50 miles, but closer to DC, but outside of 50 miles. And then there's phase 4, like myself, who live, completely in another city or another state. We did last Friday receive an extension for those phase 4 people to respond to the notice. We have another week, so we have until the 21st to respond to say either we're going to come to the office and move, or we're going to, quit or retire, or whatever the case may be for those people. I think, and then we have the 14th is still the final day for everybody else to kind of say what they're going to ultimately do as well. So either by the 14th or the 21st, everybody should have an answer. In the meantime, I just had a union meeting, and
is that August 14th?
No, I'm sorry, July.
Oh, July. Okay.
Yes, July. Yes, July 14th. July 14th and July 21st. Now, there's a lot going on with this situation. I mean, it's problematic because I haven't been able to really get this up to the national union and or our attorneys. But in order to do something like this, especially for the phase 4 employees, the government would have had to plan all of this out. They would have had to do a cost benefit assessment of moving people, what it would have cost the bureau. Would it be cost effective to do any of this stuff? They would have had to have all the policies and procedures in place for their relocation, which they do not. So at some point, I'm hoping that they can use the fact that they don't actually have these things required by law to be able to do this, that they're going to be able to stop it. But that's just me speaking personally. As a union steward, I'm going to try to do whatever I can to comply so that I can help others that maybe won't be able to. And I'm lucky that I'm a little bit, I don't have a large family, so I can be in DC, and I live close enough to DC so that I can, maybe get an apartment or what have you. But it's still difficult because, a lot of stuff. I mean, I have a place here, and I'll have to, break that lease just to go, do something else. Not to mention, I was in the process of buying a house for my family. So all of these things, and that's just me. And I can only imagine with people with children and all of that's going on. It's really ridiculous. People with, illnesses, with their doctors, cancer patients, all of that. They're not going to be able to. Some of those people are not going to be able to leave. There's certain times when you can't leave. Legal things, separation of families. You're two parents. Raising a child. You don't want to leave your child because you want to be there for them from growing. So it's an evil situation that these people are putting us through. And by the way, they have not articulated a bona fide governmental need for any of this to happen. And as an examiner, it's ridiculous. We don't work in the office. We never have worked in the office. And we have no need to be in the office because all of our work is in the field. So to have us move all the way across the country, then to statutorily be required to go and do payday lending in California makes no sense. It
Because
makes no sense.
you just spend all your time on a plane going all over the
Right.
place.
It makes no sense. And actually it's more expensive for the bureau to do that because then people are actually traveling all the way across country to do the work. Um,
And Charles, where are you? You're in California?
I know I'm actually in Allentown, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Okay, you're in PA.
Yeah. So I wasn't when I started. I was in Chicago, and I'm actually still based in Chicago. But because of our contract, our CFPB Next, which was a telework remote telework agreement that allowed everybody to live wherever they wanted. Because since the pandemic, everybody's been working at home and being successful in their job. So there's really no there's no productivity reason that we have to go in. It's under the guise of that ridiculous executive order from that person in the White House, um, and the and them saying that we need to collaborate. Well, it's as an examiner that's ridiculous because we don't work on the same schedules, and the entire exam team doesn't work at the same times unless they're maybe at an institution doing something. You're doing it's individual work where you're writing or having smaller meetings. So it just makes no sense. It really just makes no sense.
Um, you weren't sure about what the sort of legal avenues that the union was taking regarding this matter. Was that correct in that?
Well, so yet, meaning, okay, so there are things that the national union can do, and what and those are all most of those actions have to do with appealing to the merit board, or the federal relations labor association. And then there's another one. I think there's and another one. I can't remember the other, but those are all kind of administrative options. Um, there 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 could be a possibility of them asking for emergency TRO if it became necessary. And those are those avenues. Now, I mean, because of the way they've implemented this matter, um, where it wouldn't normally be that an organization like this would go to the court like we did the last time. Um, we might still be able to do it in this instance as well because they're so outside of the law. And anything that if we were to wait and try to go through the regular channels, the point the point would be moot because they would have just wrecked it anyway and foreclosed everybody's rights and by just closing everything down.
Coming up, she created a podcast to help federal workers navigate their professional careers. What she didn't know is that it would become a lifeline in more ways than one. We'll be right back. After retiring from federal service, Love Rutledge decided to explore a new venture, the Fed Upward podcast. It's been going for years now, but the last two have taught her and those who listen some valuable lessons about resiliency, pivots, and purpose. Love Rutledge, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, friend. All right, so podcast host extraordinaire with the Fed Upward podcast, the Fed Upward podcast, right?
That's right.
You've been at this for 6 years now, and it's interesting because I would say in the last 2 years, we've probably seen sort of the monumental shifts going on within the federal workforce. And I can imagine for you that during your podcasting career, things have certainly evolved over the last 2 years. Tell me about the sort of conversations that you've been having and what your experience has been.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So before the most recent administration came into office, most of my shows were about professional organizations that support federal employees, things like procedures, internal processes, how folks can get promoted. And now obviously the tenor has shifted greatly because so many people have either left voluntarily or involuntarily, and they're looking for resources to rewrite resumes. So I'm focusing on things like groups that have stood up to support displaced federal employees, folks who have lost their jobs or just felt like they needed to leave. And there is a network of organizations that have sprung up to do that kind of advocacy and support. And so I've been trying to give voice to those organizations while still doing the same kinds of reporting on policy changes and how that impacts the federal workforce, how they can find those resources, hunt them down, what's appropriate for the workplace and the changing environment that we see now. Those are the kind of topics that I've been trying to address.
What's been standing out to you in all of this? I mean, we've been talking about the sort of shifts that have been happening in the federal workforce, and to your credit, it's not just about the shifts, but it's also about, trying to figure out whether I should get term or whole life insurance. I think you had an episode on that as well.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, what do people, based on your reporting and the conversations that you have had, what do federal workers, former federal workers, what do they need right now?
I think they need to be heard. A lot of folks have had a huge shift in how they view themselves, their identity. People who work in the federal space are really passionate about their missions. Many of them have been doing the work that they loved for many, many years, very passionate about the subject matter that they work on every day. And for those who have had to leave, it has been a real identity shift. So not just a loss of a profession, a job, and a paycheck, but also a loss of self. And so I've tried to be sensitive to those shifts in the workforce, how they're feeling about themselves, and I offer one-on-one coaching support to folks who are looking for that. And also, again, just trying to help people get connected with resources to find jobs. I mean, people need to get paid. They need to feed their families, pay their mortgages, cover childcare, and that's really tough for people, particularly in the DMV right now.
Yeah, and so what got you to this point? I mean, you've been at this for 6 years now. I mean, this doesn't come from a place unless it's from a place of love, right? Especially to be in it for 6 years and be so committed and consistent in the way that you have been. Where's the genesis of this come from?
Yeah, so my podcast origin story, like most people who start something like this, I had a frustration that I couldn't easily solve. And I thought, if I'm experiencing this after 15 years of federal service, being fairly senior in the organization I was in at the time, then people who are newer or less familiar with the rules, policies, and regulations that govern federal employment are probably struggling even more. How can I help? So for me, it started when I experienced both of my pregnancies while I was working in the office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and nobody could advise me on how to cobble together a leave plan. It was before federal employees had paid parental leave. Wow. And so I was really grappling with, how do I do this in a way that I can support myself physically, mentally, and emotionally, but still get back to work when it was appropriate. And no one could advise me. There was no ill intent. I had a great chain of command, but they just didn't have the knowledge. And so after going through that really difficult experience myself, getting through the fog of raising tiny humans, once I came out of that, I really wanted to do something to give back to the federal community. And this was the best avenue I could find with a low barrier to entry. Yeah,
I mean, you've talked about a range of topics, including the rising threat for public servants, which I thought was quite fascinating because it looks specifically at some of the ordeals that our federal workers and those that are in public service are up against. For all the episodes that you've been working on over the last 6 years, how has this shaped you? How have you approached your work as a result of this experience?
That's a great question. I mean, my time as a federal employee and then now as a retiree, has been certainly an evolution. While I was a federal employee, I was definitely more focused on the day-to-day grind, the administrivia. How do people survive in a bureaucracy, from a mechanical perspective and also from like a mental health perspective, because there aren't a lot of consolidated resources out there for federal employees. now that I'm on the other side, and there are so many people who have also come out of government in the last 2 years, I've shifted focus to try to help support people who are still in the federal community orbit, but are no longer federal employees as well. And again, there are a host of organizations that have popped up to try to support that community. I know you've done reporting on that. For folks looking for those resources, no matter what your niche is, what your background is, there's probably an organization that exists that can help support you. It's just a matter of connecting with them and finding them. So I try to be, a resource to provide that kind of information and amplify the voices of other people doing that work as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think so many organizations have popped up, right? We have Welfare, that's an organization that we've talked to consistently. 27 United, who we just talked to last week, who shared their experience about how they're helping probationary federal employees, former probationary employees, and current employees as well. And so it's sort of interesting that the landscape that has popped up in the recent 2 years since we've seen this sort of seismic shift within the federal workforce. Sort of looking at the condition of the federal workforce right now, and given your own personal experience with the federal workforce, how concerned are you about the future? How concerned are you about federal workers currently?
I am extremely concerned. I think for folks who are still in the federal workplace, they are struggling because many of them, just as your guest who was from 27 United mentioned, they're doing the work of 2 and 3 people because so many people have left voluntarily or involuntarily. And so they're burned out. A lot of people are just tired. So while a couple of years ago, they might have been focused on getting promoted, professional development, trying to figure out how to do their mission more efficiently. Now they're just looking to survive, and that's a real shift. I think the way we can help support federal employees is to listen to their stories about what's going on and support them in any way we can in terms of advocacy. There are a lot of groups out there that are nonprofits that could use the support of your viewers.
I'm curious because the Trump administration has been clear that the federal workforce was sort of bloated, that it was antiquated in the way in which it responds to the needs of the day, and that these changes were important to make the workforce nimble, agile, and highly responsive. How would you characterize the federal workforce? Granted, I mean, you are now a retiree, but was there some legitimacy to the White House's feeling, or at least characterization of the federal workforce, that things needed to change to sort of bring it up to date?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to argue that federal employment, the workforce writ large, did not need to evolve and modernize. I think everyone could agree that reforms needed to happen. I think where I personally might disagree with the approach of the current administration is on the approach and the implementation. There are always ways to tighten belts and make sure that employees are working efficiently, and we have a long way to go in the federal government in making sure we have appropriate guardrails in place. And I hope that some of the policies from this administration are implemented in a way that does make things more efficient. However, I think the way implementation has rolled out in a lot of human resources policy and subject matter policy has been demoralizing to the very people who are carrying out those policies. And so I think that's tough. Obviously, we see swings between administrations, always have, and public servants are subject to the changes in policy direction that come from political appointees. And we know that when we sign up to become federal employees. So that's not a surprise. But I think the swiftness and the scope of the changes we've seen in the last 2 years have been unlike anything, at least I have seen in my 25 years of federal service, and it will take a while for folks to adjust to that. Again, there's always room for improvement. I think there is always room to tighten the belts in terms of budgets, and we do need reform. But I think the kind of reform most federal employees would love to see is a reform to the laws that govern civil service, because most of them have been on the books for 50 plus years and haven't been updated for the modern era. And so until we see that level of reform and change out of Congress, I think it's going to be hard to see true transformation in the federal workforce.
You know, it's interesting in the conversations that I've had with federal workers, and I'm sure you agree, one of the things that I hear consistently that they are proud of is they always consistently say that my work was for the American people, right?
Absolutely.
And it really much is very much sort of tied to their identity, their work, their identity in terms of who they are intrinsically, and then how they want the world to see them, that they are a servant of the country that they serve. And so for them, having to deal with these changes, a workforce in flux, that this really has sort of shaken them, shaken their identities, and sort of the way in which they even look at their work life moving forward. You know, I'm curious for you in terms of when we think about the identity issues, you know, how are people processing that? How are they trying to find a new identity and one that they've had for many years, many of them, that is no longer there and is certainly different than what they've, you know, experienced it just some time ago?
Yeah, I think that issue is the most difficult for people who have been displaced, who are no longer in the federal workspace, again, who feel like a part of them has been taken away because they can no longer do the work that they love, serving the American people. You know, I'm hopeful that a lot of folks can find ways to pivot into local and state government, into academia, into nonprofit organizations. But look, there aren't enough of those jobs to absorb all of the folks who have been displaced, at least in this area. In other parts of the country, it may be different. I can't speak to that. But it's tough, and those identity shifts have been really difficult for people to process through. I think getting back to the question you asked earlier about, you know, how things look for the future, I think that change in identity is also going to have an impact on the next generation of civil servants. You know, how do you convince people to come into a workforce that that maybe isn't as energized or as hopeful as they were previously? And how do you convince people to come into a workspace where people feel, you know, like maybe they aren't as respected or appreciated as perhaps they felt in the past? That's a hard sell. You know, there are some organizations out there trying to bring in the best and the brightest into federal service, like the Noble Reach Foundation, that is working to bring in specifically technical talent into the federal space. You know, I'm hopeful that those kinds of organizations are successful, but it's going to have to happen on a really large scale that we're not seeing right now, to try to invite folks who are in college right now into public service when they see some of the things that are happening to the current workforce. That it is tough.
Yeah, it's surprising that with all of the cuts that we've seen, that there is now a concerted effort to bring on additional people, which certainly raises questions about the initial cuts and the way in which they took place, right? The title of your podcast, Fed Upward. I'd imagine that was deeply intentional.
Absolutely.
Walk me through that.
Sure. You know, obviously I wanted to have something about federal government, Fed in the title,
Right.
But also, you know, we all know we have frustrations in the workplace, whether we work for the federal government or not, and how we move through those frustrations really matters. And I wanted to characterize my podcast as an avenue for people to find a way to react positively to some of the frustrations that they might have working in a bureaucracy, and really try to move forward and upward in their careers and in their lives using the information they glean from the show.
Yeah, for those that are a little unfamiliar with sort of the, you know, working in a bureaucracy, you know, obviously there are a lot of people that work in the private sector, so things are very different. I'd imagine that when we think about a bureaucracy, that things can be a little complicated and cumbersome in terms of how things are managed, and then ultimately how decisions are made.
Absolutely. It can become frustrating.
Yeah.
Certainly for new folks coming in, it takes a while to understand who does what to whom, and how organizations came to exist, and why others have sort of gone out of focus. And so it is sometimes a cumbersome and slow-moving set of processes within a bureaucracy. But in all fairness, our laws were created to design a system in the executive branch like that on purpose. It shouldn't be easy to ram through new policies and procedures. We need to thoughtfully examine new ideas in terms of the government and how we serve the nation's citizens. And so some of that is by design, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. But we all need support in navigating these systems, and again, that's what I started the podcast to do, is to provide that support, advocacy, and again, just mirroring back to federal employees some of the frustrations they're hearing, so they know they aren't the only ones.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Love, let's give you the final word here. I mean, clearly you are far from being done. This podcast is going alive and well. I'm curious for you, what does the future look like for this podcast? What sort of conversations can we expect?
Yeah, I will continue to highlight organizations like the ones I mentioned in our discussion, and also highlight themes that are coming up in groups like the Federal Family, it's called FedFam, Facebook group that has 60,000 members in it.
Wow.
That's a great resource for folks to go to ask questions and find resources. We'll continue to highlight these professional organizations and nonprofits that are popping up to support federal employees. And, you know, I hope folks who are still in the government or who are looking to become civil servants can maintain a positive attitude, know that, you know, all things in terms of policy and human resources when it comes to the federal government, it changes over time. And so, you know, hang in there. If I could offer any word of advice, it's hang in there and reach out for support from folks like me or some of these other organizations that have sprung up, because there are people out there ready to hear your stories, ready to help you write resumes if you're looking for something new, or to help you stay in the job that you're currently doing, supporting the American public.
All right, Love Rutledge with the podcast, the Fed Upward Podcast. I like that one. Fedding up. Love, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You can count on WUSA 9 to stay on top of the reductions to the federal workforce, those were affected, and what it means for our communities. In the meantime, scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to a special section of WUSA9.com dedicated to our coverage of this story. And of course, we'll keep you updated right here on federal workforce fallout. We appreciate you being here. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.